In the heart of Moscow, beneath the grand chandeliers of the Kremlin's opulent halls, a meeting took place that would ripple across continents and reshape global dynamics. It was an encounter cloaked in mystery and brimming with implications. Burkina Faso's military leader, Ibrahim Traore, stood face to face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The world watched as these two figures from vastly different worlds came together under one roof, their handshakes signaling something far greater than mere diplomacy. What happened next sent shockwaves through Western capitals, leaving analysts scrambling to decode its significance. This is not just another tale of geopolitics, it's a story about power, ambition, and the shifting tides of international alliances. And at its center lies a young African leader whose bold move has everyone asking, who is Ibrahim Traore, and why does his decision matter so much? To understand this moment, we must first step back and look at the man behind the headlines. Ibrahim Traore isn't your typical politician or statesman. At just 35 years old, he rose to prominence during a tumultuous period in Burkina Faso's history, seizing control amid chaos and promising stability for a nation plagued by insurgency and poverty. His rise wasn't marked by polished speeches or carefully crafted campaigns, but by grit, determination, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Traore positioned himself as a defender of his people against both internal threats and external interference, often criticizing what he saw as neo-colonial forces meddling in Africa's affairs. Now, standing alongside Putin, he appeared poised to take his vision even further, aligning Burkina Faso with a bloc that has long sought to counterbalance Western influence, the BRICS nations. For those unfamiliar, BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, a coalition formed to promote economic cooperation and challenge the dominance of traditional powers like the United States and Europe. Over time, the group has evolved into more than just an economic alliance. It's become a symbol of resistance against the established global order. By joining BRICS, countries signal their desire to break free from dependency on Western institutions and forge new partnerships rooted in mutual benefit. For many African leaders, including Traore, this represents an opportunity to redefine their role on the world stage. But such a move doesn't come without risks. Aligning too closely with Russia, especially in today's polarized climate, could provoke backlash from Western allies who see themselves as champions of democracy and human rights. Yet, for Traore, the potential rewards seem worth the gamble. As news of the meeting spread, reactions poured in from all corners of the globe. In Washington, London, and Paris, officials expressed concern over what they described as a dangerous shift in alliances. Critics argued that Traore's embrace of BRICS signaled a rejection of democratic values and a tilt toward authoritarianism. Others pointed out the irony that former colonial powers were now accusing an African leader of abandoning principles they themselves had often ignored when it suited them. Meanwhile, supporters hailed Traore's decision as a courageous stand for sovereignty and self-determination. Social media buzzed with debates, memes, and conspiracy theories, each side spinning the narrative to fit their worldview. Amidst all the noise, one thing became clear. Ibrahim Traore had captured the world's attention, whether people liked it or not. But what exactly transpired during that meeting in Moscow? Details remain scarce, shrouded in secrecy and speculation. According to official statements, discussions focused on strengthening ties between Burkina Faso and Russia, particularly in areas like security, trade, and infrastructure development. There were whispers of arms deals and promises of investment, though nothing concrete emerged publicly. What did emerge, however, was Traore's announcement that Burkina Faso intended to join BRICS, a declaration that caught many off guard. While some dismissed it as symbolic posturing, others recognized it as a calculated move aimed at leveraging Burkina Faso's strategic position in West Africa. After all, the country sits at the crossroads of regional politics, economics, and conflict, making it a valuable player in any geopolitical chess game. The implications of this decision are profound, touching on everything from regional stability to global energy markets. For Burkina Faso itself, Joining BRICS could mean access to much-needed resources and expertise to combat the jihadist insurgency ravaging its northern territories. It might also open doors to alternative funding sources, beyond the stringent conditions imposed by Western-backed financial institutions. On a broader scale, Traore's alignment with BRICS signals a growing trend among African nations to diversify their partnerships and reduce reliance on former colonial masters. Countries like Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and Mali have already taken similar steps, reflecting a wider push for multipolarity in international relations. But while such moves may offer short-term benefits, they also raise questions about long-term consequences. Can small nations truly navigate the complexities of great power rivalries without getting caught in the crossfire? And what happens if the promised support fails to materialize? Back in Burkina Faso, reactions were mixed. Some citizens welcomed the news, seeing it as a chance to assert independence and secure better living conditions. Others voiced skepticism, fearing that closer ties with Russia and other BRICS members might come at the expense of transparency and accountability. Protests erupted in Ouagadougou, the capital city, with demonstrators holding placards demanding answers. "What will this bring us?" read one sign, capturing the uncertainty gripping the nation. For ordinary Burkinabés struggling daily with unemployment, food shortages, and violence, the stakes couldn't be higher. They've seen too many promises broken and too many dreams deferred to blindly trust another round of political maneuvering. Yet, amidst the doubt and division, there's also hope, a fragile belief that perhaps this time things will be different. While the focus remains on Traore and his decisions, it's impossible to ignore the larger context shaping events. The war in Ukraine continues to dominate global discourse, exposing fault lines between East and West. Sanctions, proxy battles, and diplomatic spats have turned the world into a battleground of ideologies, with smaller nations caught in the middle. In this environment, every choice carries weight, every alliance sends a message. For Russia, courting African leaders like Traore serves multiple purposes: expanding its sphere of influence, countering Western sanctions, and showcasing itself as a viable partner for development. For China, which plays a leading role in BRICS, Africa represents a critical frontier for securing resources and building infrastructure projects under its Belt and Road Initiative. As these giants vie for dominance, the fate of nations like Burkina Faso hangs precariously in the balance. And so, as the dust settles from the Moscow summit, one question looms large. What comes next? Will Ibrahim Traore's gamble pay off, ushering in a new era of prosperity and autonomy for Burkina Faso? Or will it lead down a path fraught with peril, alienating key allies and exacerbating existing challenges? The answers lie somewhere in the future, obscured by layers of complexity and uncertainty. But one thing is certain: this story is far from over. With tensions mounting and stakes rising, the world waits anxiously to see how events unfold. Stay tuned, because the next chapter promises to be just as dramatic, unpredictable, and consequential as the first. To truly grasp the gravity of Ibrahim Traore's decision, we need to step back and examine the forces that brought him to this pivotal moment. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation in West Africa, has long been plagued by instability. Once hailed as a beacon of democracy on the continent, the country descended into chaos over the past decade due to rising jihadist insurgencies, political corruption, and economic stagnation. For years, Western powers like France and the United States positioned themselves as allies, offering military aid and development programs. But for many Burkinabés, these efforts felt hollow, more about maintaining influence than genuine partnership. The scars of colonialism still lingered, and frustration with foreign intervention grew louder with each passing year. It was against this backdrop of disillusionment that Traore emerged, seizing power in a coup d'état driven by promises to restore order and protect national sovereignty. Traore's rise wasn't accidental. It was born out of desperation. Just 35, he became one of Africa's youngest leaders, stepping into a role fraught with challenges. His initial moves were met with skepticism, but also cautious optimism. He vowed to prioritize local needs over foreign agendas, even if it meant ruffling feathers in Paris or Washington. This defiance struck a chord with many Africans who had grown weary of being pawns in global power games. Yet as much as his rhetoric resonated domestically, it put him at odds with traditional Western allies. Sanctions loomed, diplomatic ties frayed, and Burkina Faso found itself increasingly isolated. That isolation is what ultimately pushed Traore toward alternative partnerships, including those within BRICS. To him, aligning with Russia and China wasn't merely a strategic choice, it was survival. But let's not paint this as a straightforward battle between East and West. The reality is far messier. Within Burkina Faso, opinions are deeply divided. On one side, there are those who view Traore's pivot to BRICS as a bold step toward liberation, a chance to break free from decades of dependency and chart a new course. These supporters see potential in Russian arms deals to bolster the fight against insurgents and Chinese investments to rebuild crumbling infrastructure. They argue that the West hasn't delivered on its promises, so why not try something different? On the other side, critics warn of the dangers of trading one form of exploitation for another. They point to Russia's controversial track record in Africa, from mercenaries accused of human rights abuses to opaque business dealings that benefit elites more than ordinary citizens. And then there's China, whose loans often come with strings attached, leaving some African nations trapped in cycles of debt. For these detractors, joining BRICS feels less like empowerment and more like jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Meanwhile, international observers are watching closely, trying to decipher what Traore's move means for the broader geopolitical landscape. In Moscow, Putin likely sees this as a victory, a sign that his efforts to expand Russia's footprint in Africa are paying off. By welcoming Traore into the fold, he's sending a clear message to the West. Your days of uncontested dominance are numbered. Beijing, too, has reason to celebrate. As China continues its quest for resources and markets, securing alliances in strategically important regions like West Africa strengthens its hand in the global arena. Even India and South Africa, though quieter in their responses, recognize the symbolic weight of adding another African nation to the BRICS coalition. Each member brings unique strengths and vulnerabilities, creating a web of interdependence that could either stabilize or destabilize the bloc depending on how things play out. Yet, beneath all the grand narratives of power and ambition lies a simpler truth. People's lives hang in the balance. In Burkina Faso, where daily existence is already precarious, the stakes couldn't be higher. Farmers struggling to grow crops amidst climate change-induced droughts wonder whether Russian fertilizers will reach them in time. Mothers grieving the loss of children to terrorist attacks pray that promised military support will make a difference. Young people dreaming of education and opportunity fear they'll be left behind in yet another round of elite negotiations. For them, this isn't about abstract concepts like multipolarity or neo-colonialism. It's about survival. And while Traore may have grand visions of reshaping Burkina Faso's destiny, he must contend with the very real, very human consequences of his decisions. As tensions mount, cracks begin to show within Traore's inner circle. Some advisors urge caution, warning that leaning too heavily on Russia and China could backfire politically and economically. Others push for an even bolder stance, advocating complete severance of ties with Western nations. Caught between these opposing voices, Traore faces mounting pressure to prove he made the right call. Rumors swirl of secret meetings with Russian envoys and whispered deals struck late at night. Meanwhile, opposition groups inside Burkina Faso grow bolder, organizing protests and calling for transparency. The streets buzz with speculation, and social media amplifies every rumor tenfold. Is Traore building a better future, or is he playing a dangerous game that risks plunging the country deeper into crisis? Back in the corridors of power across Europe and North America, policymakers scramble to respond. Sanctions are discussed, diplomatic channels reopened, and contingency plans drawn up. Some advocate engagement, arguing that isolating Burkina Faso further would only drive it closer to adversaries. Others insist on taking a hard line, viewing Traore's actions as a direct challenge to Western values and interests. Behind closed doors, debates rage over how to counteract the growing influence of BRICS without alienating African nations entirely. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Decades after decolonization, former imperial powers find themselves grappling with the same questions of control and legitimacy. And then, just when it seems the situation can't get any more complex, news breaks of an impending visit by Chinese officials to Ouagadougou. Details are scarce, but sources suggest discussions will focus on infrastructure projects and trade agreements. Could this be the lifeline Burkina Faso desperately needs? Or is it another layer of entanglement in a web of competing interests? As cameras flash and diplomats shake hands, ordinary Burkinabés watch with wary eyes, unsure whether to hope or brace for disappointment. One thing is certain. Every move now carries monumental weight, and the margin for error is razor thin. With time running out and pressures mounting from all sides, Ibrahim Traore finds himself standing at a crossroads. The choices he makes in the coming days will define not only his legacy, but the future of millions. Will he double down on his alliance with BRICS, betting everything on a gamble that could reshape Africa's place in the world? Or will he seek a middle path, attempting to mend fences with the West while navigating the treacherous waters of great power rivalry? As the clock ticks toward a climactic confrontation, the world holds its breath, waiting to see which way the winds of change will blow. As the Chinese delegation arrived in Ouagadougou, the atmosphere shifted. Streets were lined with both hopeful citizens and wary protesters, their signs reflecting the deep divisions within Burkina Faso. Inside the presidential palace, Ibrahim Traore sat at the center of a high-stakes negotiation that would determine his country's future. The Chinese envoys came bearing promises: new roads, schools, hospitals, and factories funded by Beijing's seemingly bottomless coffers. But they also brought demands, subtle yet firm, about resource-sharing agreements and strategic partnerships. Meanwhile, whispers from Moscow hinted at Russian military advisors preparing to deploy, adding another layer of complexity to an already fragile situation. Just as it seemed Traore might commit fully to this new alliance, a surprise twist unfolded. A leaked document surfaced online, purportedly detailing secret terms of the deals being discussed. While some clauses focused on infrastructure development, others raised eyebrows. Long-term mining rights for rare earth minerals, exclusive access to agricultural exports, and even hints of establishing military bases. Public outrage erupted almost instantly. Protesters flooded the streets, accusing Traore of selling out their nation under the guise of progress. Opposition leaders seized the moment, calling for emergency sessions in parliament and demanding transparency. For the first time since taking power, Traore faced not just external pressure but internal rebellion. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If Traore pushed forward with the agreements, he risked losing the trust of his people entirely. But backing down meant alienating BRICS allies who had positioned themselves as lifelines during Burkina Faso's darkest hours. In a dramatic turn, Traore called for a national address, a rare move signaling the gravity of the situation. Standing before cameras, flanked by flags of Burkina Faso and no foreign insignias, he spoke directly to his people. His voice was calm but resolute. "We stand at a crossroads," he began. "Our choices today will shape generations to come. I promised you sovereignty, dignity, and prosperity, not dependency wrapped in shiny promises." What followed was unexpected. Instead of signing the full agreements, Traore announced a scaled-back version, retaining only projects deemed critical for immediate survival. Irrigation systems to combat drought, clinics to address healthcare crises, and modest road repairs to connect isolated communities. He rejected provisions involving long-term resource exploitation and military installations, citing concerns over national security and self-determination. It was a bold gamble, one that could anger both BRICS partners and Western critics, but it resonated deeply with many Burkinabés. Social media lit up with messages of support, praising Traore for standing firm against what some saw as predatory practices disguised as aid. Yet, the resolution didn't stop there. Recognizing the need for balance, Traore extended an olive, branch to Western nations, inviting them to engage constructively rather than punish through sanctions or isolation. "We are open to dialogue," he declared. "But let it be clear, we seek partners, not overlords." This statement marked a pivotal shift in tone, emphasizing collaboration over confrontation. France responded cautiously, offering renewed efforts to stabilize the region through joint counterterrorism initiatives. The United States, too, signaled willingness to explore fresh avenues of cooperation, particularly in areas like education and technology transfer. Behind the scenes, tensions simmered among BRICS members. Russia reportedly expressed frustration over the watered-down agreements, while China adopted a more pragmatic stance, acknowledging the importance of maintaining goodwill. Despite these challenges, Burkina Faso remained part of the coalition, albeit with revised terms that reflected its unique circumstances. For Traore, this compromise represented a delicate balancing act, one that prioritized his people's needs above geopolitical posturing. Months later, the dust began to settle. New roads stretched across rural landscapes, bringing farmers closer to markets. Clinics opened their doors, treating patients who once traveled miles for care. And though jihadist threats persisted, increased regional coordination, bolstered by cautious Western involvement, showed signs of progress. Not everything worked perfectly. Corruption still plagued certain projects, and skepticism lingered among some citizens. Yet amid the imperfections, there was hope, a fragile but tangible sense that Burkina Faso might carve out a path of its own making. Looking back, Ibrahim Traore's journey serves as a reminder of the complexities inherent in leadership. His decision to join BRICS shocked the world, exposing fault lines between old powers and emerging blocs. But it also underscored a broader truth. Africa is no longer content to sit passively on the sidelines of global affairs. Nations like Burkina Faso are demanding agency, refusing to be pawns in someone else's game. Whether Traore's choices lead to lasting change remains to be seen, but one thing is undeniable. He forced the world to take notice. For viewers tuning in from around the globe, this story offers lessons beyond borders. It challenges us to think critically about alliances, accountability, and the true cost of partnership. Who benefits when nations align themselves with powerful blocs? What happens when promises collide with reality? And most importantly, how do we ensure that decisions made in boardrooms and palaces reflect the realities of those living on the ground? As the camera pans out, capturing the vibrant streets of Ouagadougou buzzing with life, we're left with a final thought. Power may shift, but the voices of ordinary people will always shape history's course.